Hi, this is Patrick Henry, the CEO of QuestFusion with The Real Deal, What Matters. I'm here today with Jeremy Glaser. He is a partner at Mintz Levin, a law firm globally, I guess.
We are global, yes.
And you're here in San Diego as well. He basically co-chairs the firm's venture capital and emerging company practice. So Jeremy has tons of experience working with both startups, founders of companies,
Yes.
entrepreneurs, as well as venture capitalists, so basically working on both sides. And many of his companies that were formerly private are public companies as well, so a lot of experience dealing with SEC things and
Yes.
filings and all the good stuff related with public companies. So you must have been involved in like dozens, if not many dozens, of transactions, public financings, venture financings,
M&A transactions,
M&A, pipes. So
probably hundreds. That's what happens when you get old. Hundreds.
And Jeremy is also a very honored and decorated attorney, and most recently he was the San Diego Venture Capital Lawyer of the Year. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And we're just going to talk a little bit about what Jeremy's been up to lately. He's a member of the American Bar Association. He's always a great resource for me about a variety of different things related to startups and the issues with the law.
Thank
So first, I'd like to why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you personally and your background and where you got to
Sure.
where you are now.
Sure. So I went to college at Duke University.
Yeah.
Always knew I was going to go to law school. And in fact, it's really funny, even as a young kid, I remember telling someone, my goal is to get to Harvard Law School.
Wow.
And luckily I was able to achieve that, and so I did go to Harvard Law. And then when I graduated, came straight to California. The reason that I did, Patrick, is, as we've talked about, I just always have loved technology, and I've always really loved entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So, for me, I knew I had to come to California after graduating.
Yeah.
And in fact, we could talk about this later, but I've been so much in love with being an entrepreneur that, as you know, I've twice gone off to clients, both in the finance world and in the tech world.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was in law school, I actually ran a little business with an old Apple IIe, if people even know what those things are anymore, and a daisy wheel printer. Mm-hmm. So I was very early on in messing around with computer technology, and then sold that business when I graduated and came to California to start practicing startup and entrepreneurial law.
That's great. That's awesome. So what do you think are the best qualities to be a good corporate attorney?
Well, look, you always have to start, obviously, with experience and expertise, right? That's just sort of a given. But there's a lot of, but to be honest, there's a lot of corporate lawyers who know how to do deals and have the expertise. Yeah. So the real question is, what differentiates a good corporate lawyer? And from my perspective, I think it's passion. I think you've got to make sure that the corporate lawyer you're working with has a passion for your business, a passion for where you are in the life cycle of your business. Yeah. Because if that doesn't match, let's be honest, right? You're not going to get their attention at the level that you need and want. You're not going to get their availability. You want someone who has that background but is excited to bring it to bear for your company.
Yeah. I mean, definitely in my experience, running companies and having a variety of different lawyers involved, some of the big things for me are you have to have the right partner level support. It's sometimes as a startup you get stuck with more of a junior associate and you're not getting the right partner level support. So of course you have to have the right kind of company that draws a partner in, and you don't always need a partner, but talk to me a little bit about that, with the companies you've been involved in. How intimately are you involved with companies from that perspective?
Yeah, sure. So, look, I'm sort of one of these unique lawyers in that, like I said, I love technology. Yeah. And I really just love the idea of building businesses, right? So given the choice between working on, some massive transaction for, a Fortune 100 company or hanging out with an entrepreneur with a startup, I'm going to go with the entrepreneur and the startup. So I personally make my time available to entrepreneurs, to people with startups, because, to be honest, that's what gets me up every morning, right? Yeah. After a while, to be honest, I can do lots of finance things. I sort of know the SEC law. I can do M&A deals, and while those have interesting aspects to it and can be fun, fundamentally, I really love the idea of being part of sometimes changing an industry. And I've been lucky enough to have some clients that had some significant impacts on industries. And I've also, maybe it's just sort of my, I was an economics major, and so I've always been interested in what it takes to, create jobs and build a business. So I'm really fascinated by that too. So, long way of answering. I think I'm sort of unusual in that as a partner, I'm really available to the earlier stage companies.
Yeah.
Always have my my iPhone with me. I make it my business to respond quickly. I mean, literally the day. And in fact, sometimes people are amazed how quickly they hear back from me on an email or a voicemail. But again, that goes back to what we talked about. I think that's that passion, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times the reason that companies end up being passed down to younger attorneys and can't get access to the senior partner is because the senior partner isn't passionate about working with early stage companies.
Yeah, it's a shame because I think it's obviously I've got a passion for entrepreneurs, being an entrepreneur myself, and I think those are the most exciting things. I mean, definitely transactions can be exciting too, but I really enjoy that. I mean, one of the things that Jeremy also always brings to the table is he's I've dealt with many attorneys throughout my personal life as well as my professional career, and unless you have somebody in-house as a general counsel, they charge by the hour. And one of the things I totally respect about Jeremy is not only he's super knowledgeable, but he's very efficient in terms of conversation. So that's always been something I've really liked about you. So talk to me a little bit about the venture industry and how it's evolving, with these mega firms and kind of there's not so many mid-sized firms anymore, and who's filling the gap of that for seed stage and type of companies, and what do you see going on there?
Sure. Well, again, it's been so interesting to watch the venture capital industry evolve over my 30 plus years now of doing this, right?
Yeah.
So I started doing venture deals back in 1985.
Okay.
And for people who were even born back then, right? It was a really different industry, right? Back then, the venture industry was really a lot of founders, technology-oriented people who had built businesses, sold them, had a successful exit, and were investing their money side by side with some maybe smaller institutional type investors.
Yeah.
That was the industry. It was a very hands-on industry, right? These entrepreneurs were side by side with the founder building a company. That wasn't just show up at 4 to 5 board meetings a year, pop in, give some advice, and then disappear.
Yeah.
I watched this model evolve, particularly into the .com era in the 2000s.
Right.
And unfortunately, you saw a lot of the real benefits of the venture capital industry that it provided to entrepreneurs sort of went away.
Yeah.
It became much more of a financial investment. You saw people coming into the industry who had more, MBAs out of Wharton and out of Harvard, which, MBAs out of Wharton and Harvard are really smart people, but there's something special about building a business from scratch and having an idea and going through all the ups and downs and changes, which I'm sure we'll talk about more as we get deeper into this interview. So, I think that the industry went through a major evolution as the funds got bigger and it became more of a financially oriented industry.
Yeah.
Now, we saw that change a little bit after the dot-com, crash, and everything sort of got a little tougher, and people realized that it was harder to make companies successful other than just throwing cash into them. It took more than cash.
Yeah.
It took experience. It took, marketing knowledge. It took sales knowledge, right? It took a great management team. So we saw it come back a little bit, and then, in 07 again, as the market started to get a little, wilder. Again, you saw the bigger funds and getting back to this approach again of more of a financial model. And now, of course, here we are in 2016, where we've just lived through the rise of the unicorns, right?
Yeah.
Where we've had these very large private companies doing very large rounds. And the reality is, the venture capitalists are putting in big amounts of money.
Yeah.
The big VC funds are, they're sitting on a lot of boards. They're involved with a lot of companies. So the industry has evolved. Now, we've been able to grow some great big successful companies, so obviously it's worked. But from my perspective, when I look back, I'm sort of melancholy for the old days when the VCs really were, in there in the weeds, really digging in with the entrepreneurs, almost like an extension of the management team as opposed to a financial investor.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, you were a past president of the San Diego Venture Group. I mean, what was that like?
Well, gosh, that was a while back. So that was back in 2003. I've been on the board, for a long time, and very involved in the San Diego Venture Group. And again, this is something that I just do just to give back to the community. I really want to be part of educating entrepreneurs, which is why we do things like this, right?
Yeah.
To help entrepreneurs understand, what it takes to build a business, how best to raise money. And so the San Diego Venture Group, that's really its goal, right? Is to educate entrepreneurs, to help them understand the best way to raise money, the best way to build a company, to get connected with people who can help them achieve that.
Okay.
So, the Venture Group's been a great organization for me. Being the president of it, back, that's 13 years ago now, it was a great experience because it was, really fun to run an organization. Again, that little entrepreneurial, spirit I have in me always sort of comes out when I get to be involved more on the business side than just the legal side. So
right.
it was a great experience.
That's cool. So, what are your favorite parts and least favorite parts about working with entrepreneurs?
Well, so we talked about my most favorite is just the fact that they're full of new ideas and very creative, right? I love being around that energy of a new idea, a new business,
sure.
and watching them sort of figure it out and build a team and make mistakes and then get them fixed and get them right and then fundamentally break through, right, when you get that next round of financing or that M&A exit or the IPO. I mean, that's what to me, that's what I love, right? I love to be part of that and experience that and help them.
Yeah.
So, what do I not like, right? I'd say, probably the hardest thing for me is when I see entrepreneurs who are not listening to really good advisors.
Yeah.
There's so many people out there, and you're a great example of this, Patrick, right? There's people who've built great companies, have, gotten the bruises along the way, who know where all the pitfalls are, or at least most of them.
Yeah.
And when I see entrepreneurs not embracing that, not willing to, bring those people in under the tent to, as I always say, avoid the mistakes that are easy to avoid.
Yeah.
Because you're going to make mistakes, right?
Sure.
Don't make the obvious ones, right? Just make the ones that are less obvious.
Yeah.
So that's probably the hardest thing for me is because I've seen this movie so many times and I can just see it coming.
Yeah.
And I do my best to try to introduce them to folks and get them to people who can help them avoid it, but some just, they got to sort of do it themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes that's the stubbornness factor or the anarchist factor is the reason why some people start companies, which there are some great benefits of that, but you need to temper it with an ability to learn, an ability to listen, not only to advisors, but to customers. And in order to build something really big, really great, really sustaining, you need to always kind of stay in that learning mode and make yourself available.
So agree with you. And by the way, just a quick aside on that, from a fundraising perspective, as you know, that's a really important issue for venture capitalists.
Yeah.
If they see an entrepreneur who's not willing to listen, who's not willing to sort of grow and take their advice as far as these pitfalls,
sure,
that is a pretty big red flag for them to walk away and not fund a company.
Yeah, I remember one of the companies I ran right after coming in. Although some people know you on the board, there's always this kind of testing out period. Like I was going to write some really large purchase order for one of our suppliers, multi-million-dollar purchase order. So obviously the board was very interested in the details of it, and it's real easy to say, hey, you hired me as the CEO, just let me do my job. But I wrote like a 3-page email about the details, and I think you have to put yourself in a position to be a little humble about some of this stuff and be willing to show that you can be transparent and be willing to be vulnerable to people challenging things, as opposed to just bull in China shop. And sometimes that's difficult for some entrepreneurs, especially for founders, because a lot of times they see it as their baby more than as a company. And I like that passion associated with that. But again, you can help the child or the baby grow up better and quicker if you have the smartest, brightest people around the table and you actually listen to them.
You're so right. I mean, again, just like you, I've seen so many entrepreneurs and founders in particular make the mistake of not using their board correctly.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of entrepreneurs say, "Oh, I don't want to get venture capital money because they're going to fire me."
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons that they end up in a situation where they get fired is because they're not transparent, because they're not using the board the right way.
Yeah.
And if in fact you do know how to use the board, and you get advice from folks like yourself and myself, who've been in literally hundreds of board meetings,
yeah,
you're going to likely avoid, again, those most obvious mistakes in how to manage your board.
Yeah. And I think, just based on my experience, it's good to, as you start getting outside people on the board, especially venture investors, and hopefully the venture investors are smart money investors that have some domain expertise in what you're doing. Maybe you're not fortunate to have somebody that is intimately involved in that, but if you don't have that, it's good to get other industry people on the board, because when the shit eventually hits the fan, which it always does,
yes.
You want to have somebody around the table that is the voice of reason, that it's not just Patrick saying this, it's other people that are experienced saying, hey, this isn't an issue with the CEO, this is an issue with the marketer, this is an issue with this customer, or I've seen this before.
That's right. So
building that right kind of collaborative, smartest people that you can find, both on the management team as well as on the board, is pretty important, especially when you get into times of adversity.
So important. And, probably the best advice I give to entrepreneurs about building boards is, I say, look yourself in the mirror, ask yourself what you're strong in. Look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself what you're weak in.
Yeah.
Now do the same thing around your management team. And when you identify what those things that you don't have in your management team and you don't have in yourself are, that's the board members you need to add, because you need access to that expertise, that knowledge base that you obviously don't have within the team.
Yeah, and you've got to make yourself vulnerable. You got to say, okay, I'm going to find the smartest person in this area, and they might even be smarter than me in that area, but that's going to be a benefit to the overall company if I get that person. Some people just can't do that. They have to always be the smartest person in the room, and not only in the area where they're the expert, but I call it kind of transfer of credentials. They're an expert in this area, therefore they're an expert in all areas, and many founders are like that. Not all. I've worked with some awesome founders that are super great to work with, but many do have that kind of attitude.
But I think the important thing for for the listeners of and the watchers of this video and the listeners of this audio is that the reality is that when you look at the folks who are the most successful, by and large, they're the ones who do listen, who are trainable, who have that sort of vulnerability and are willing to put smarter people on the board, or even better, hire people around them a lot smarter than them. I gotta tell you, that's my philosophy. When I'm hiring associates, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I want them to be the smartest guy in the room and the smartest woman in the room, without a doubt. Yeah.
And it's kind of, I think Apple's a great example. Steve Jobs is one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs ever. He did it multiple times. He did it with Apple twice. He did it with Next Computer. He did it with Pixar. But the company, even after his passing, he's got great people that he brought in the company that continue to make that company super successful. Now they're a larger company, not a startup anymore. But I remember hearing a speech that he made up in the Bay Area after he had gone back to Apple the second time, and he was talking to basically the team that he brought in, and this is like a big startup. It's a big startup where we have the ability, if we get this thing to the right size and still are able to invest in a lot of R&D, which we wouldn't be able to do as a startup, then we can make this into a really great company. You've actually been, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but you've not only been, on the service provider, corporate attorney side, but you also have been the general counsel at a startup. You've been the inside counsel at a hedge fund.
Correct.
How does that kind of bring? What have you learned from those experiences that you bring to the table with startups these days?
Wow, Patrick, so much. Okay, so I was an attorney for 15 years. Was an associate, made partner. Was only inside a law firm. When I then left and joined a very hot client of mine during the dot-com era that had raised literally $100 million of capital from big-name venture capitalists. And that experience completely changed the way I practice law. It changed me in a lot of ways, but probably the most significant way was, for the first time in my life, I was on the receiving end of a bill from a law firm.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the size of the bill that was shocking, and it was, because we were doing a lot of transactions.
Yeah.
But it was the lack of information that I had been given from, by the way, my own law firm. It was another firm I was at prior. So if anyone was going to be talking to me about what they were doing and who they were using, you would think it would have been that situation.
Right.
But instead, no, I just got a bill, 6 weeks after all this work was done, describing all kinds of work they had done that I wasn't even totally aware they were doing.
Right.
And people who I wasn't even talking to and didn't know were working on matters for my company.
Yeah.
That was a huge eye-opening moment for me.
Yeah.
And I remember literally the first time I got that bill, looking at that and thinking, wow, when I go back to practice, I don't ever want my clients to feel this way about my bills like I feel right now about this bill.
Yeah.
And so it's really changed. It changed. This is 16 years ago, and it changed the way I communicate with clients about, upfront about what we're doing, about what costs are supposed to be, communicating about staffing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And in fact, it completely changed the way I do venture financings and big M&A deals and IPOs.
Yeah.
And I even have a very detailed process now that I developed because of that experience.
Yeah.
That builds in like a fail-safe to ensure that we're having regular weekly communications around staffing, around budgets, around what we're trying to get done in the current week.
Yeah.
All to avoid ever having a client feel badly about the costs and communications and so on. The other thing is just urgency.
Yeah.
So I always felt like I was very responsive before I had this experience.
Yeah.
But again, after being inside a company and watching things develop and realizing how urgently I needed to hear from someone at my law firm, and I was reaching out, and a whole day would go by and I wouldn't hear from somebody.
Right.
And again, I can, as we're having this conversation, I can still remember sitting at my desk, at 7, 8 o'clock at night and going, I can't believe I haven't heard back from, XYZ. Like I called them first thing this morning saying I had to talk to them. It's the end of the day and I haven't heard from anybody.
Right.
And again, that same thing, I don't ever want a client sitting in their offices ever saying that about me.
Right. Some are operating on a stopwatch when you're working in the startup world, and the law firm's working on a calendar. So how do you get in sync? But I think these are great things for any entrepreneur to be aware of. I mean, I've always been an advocate of getting the best advice possible. Have the best advisors that you can afford and attract to whatever deal you're in, and that includes outside attorneys. And I'm an advocate of using a full service law firm, that has the capabilities to bring that in, but then you have to manage that. And at times, like when we took Entropic public, or we were in the process of taking Entropic public, we brought our outside counsel, who was a former partner of yours when you were at another firm, in-house, and cut our bills. I mean, the guy every year would pay for himself for 2 years because just the way that it works. But you can't build some massive internal capability either if you're not at scale to be able to do that. So you're always using specialists, but you want to look as an entrepreneur for an attorney that provides a level of transparency, that has the domain expertise, that has experience that they can bring to bear as a board advisor, not just as an advisor to the company.
Agreed. And
all those things you want to be able to check the box on those. So tell us a little bit about your philosophy of managing relationships with your general partners versus your clients and those kinds of things.
Sure. Look, I'm a big believer that we all want to work with our friends, right?
Sure.
So to me, it's so important to establish personal relationships. And I think, as you just talked about a little bit earlier, business relationships that are beyond just being a lawyer-client relationship.
Sure.
So I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that many of my clients really view me as an extension of the management team.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just within the last couple of months, one of my very large private equity clients had me come up to actually interview a person that they were thinking about hiring as their in-house counsel. They wanted my view before they actually made the hire.
Sure.
And that happens, with a lot of my clients. They really want me to be, again, an extension of the management team. I value that.
Yeah.
And then also, hey, I'm a big believer in you got to break bread.
Yeah.
So always want to be available with clients to, grab breakfast, grab lunch, grab dinner, spend social time so you can really,
sure.
Because that's really when you learn a lot about, what's happening in their company, what their interests are, what their needs are.
Yeah.
And you just develop such a good, strong relationship. And again, why have I sort of chosen with my career to focus it on technology companies and startups and entrepreneurs and, and biotech companies? It's because you get to establish those kinds of relationships. These companies are still relatively small, they're still growing, they still really, they don't have a lot of people within the company that they can go to talk about issues. So we, you know, as their attorney and as their business advisor, I get to play that role with them, and I really value that.
Yeah, that's another kind of key point for entrepreneurs out there. A good corporate attorney can be a good business advisor. It's not just about the law, it's about you have so much experience sitting on boards, you know, being in board meetings over decades and seeing so many different things. You can be a great resource, and I've definitely found that with you and with other people that I've worked with closely from various different law firms. So what's the most gratifying thing that you've done in your career?
So, you know, there's a lot of things I really enjoyed. I mean, and things from within my law firm and watching associates grow and develop. But I'd say probably, you know, the most gratifying was watching one particular client who, just a great entrepreneur who had some really strong domain expertise, actually in the video editing space. And I always would look at this entrepreneur and say, wow, you know, you're almost too nice to be successful, right? Because I think people have this view, right? If you're just too nice, you're not going to make it,
yeah.
Right? And this guy was just so nice. Like, everybody just liked him, and he never lost his temper, and, you know, he worked well with everybody. And I remember watching him and thinking, okay, if this guy can make it, you know, the world is a good place. and he did, you know, and as I like to joke, you know, he was an overnight success in 10 years of building the business. But he was ultimately very successful, and that's really gratifying to see someone who really, you know, did everything the right way, didn't take any shortcuts, treated people the right way, and then had a really successful, you know, exit, and now is, you know, living the good life.
That's awesome. And then how about kind of on the flip side, you know, what's kind of been the most difficult or challenging situation you've been involved with?
You know, probably the most challenging thing and the most painful thing is, unfortunately, when CEOs have to be removed from the companies. Because as I just talked about, so much of what I do is to develop that personal relationship. Mm-hmm. And I really value that. And I, even though I counsel to the company, I really want to make sure that there's a good, strong personal relationship with the management team, with the CEO.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, sometimes, you know, companies stumble, CEOs don't manage the board correctly, the VCs want to go in a different way, and you end up in a situation where the CEO is going to be terminated. That's really, really painful because, you know, it's hard for me to try to explain to that CEO, this isn't me, it's not me personally, you have to understand, this is, you know, we're the counsel to the company, we have to deal with this process.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I wish I could sit here and tell you, you know, these relationships survive those things. Unfortunately, most of the time they don't.
Yeah.
That when the CEOs are sort of forced out by the VCs, I've unfortunately found that they sort of don't continue on as, you know, as sort of personal friends, and that's painful.
Yeah, that's tough. And in those situations, you know, I mean, it's probably a little difficult to assess on an actual percentage basis, but how much do you think of those situations are preventable? You know, if they were to, I mean, it's a little bit of an armchair quarterback thing, but if they were to, you know, work with the board in a more transparent way, or get better advisors, or listen to the advisors that they had, you know, do you think that these things were just inevitable? Every one of these situations would have happened anyway? Or, you know, if they would have done things just a little bit different, it could have been a different outcome?
Yeah, I don't think any of them were inevitable, and I think actually, if they had done things differently, they could have changed the situation. And in fact, you know, there's a lot of things that you talked about that could sort of feed into why the relationship falls apart and why the VCs lose confidence. But if there's one thing I could tell entrepreneurs to not do, don't overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
That when I look back over 30 years and lots of CEOs, you know, getting removed from companies, almost without fail, it's because they keep coming into board meetings with rosy projections and everything's upbeat, and meeting after meeting and quarter after quarter, their rosy projections are missed and missed badly.
Yeah.
And the VCs and the board members in public companies obviously as well, with missed earnings forecasts, etc.
Right.
They lose confidence, and once that happens, you can't gain that back.
Yeah, it's really tough. Yeah, really, really tough. I mean, that is definitely a critical thing in terms of managing a board and even managing investors on Wall Street. And it's a delicate balance because you want to be optimistic. You want to show a growth path that is exciting for people, but at the same time, you have to deliver results. And it's a challenge.
And the key,
it's a
the
real
key is,
challenge.
but you can't hide the ball, right? I mean, I think unfortunately,
Yeah, if you're not providing a level of transparency, especially with your board, you know,
Exactly.
you need to be very transparent with your board.
And I think unfortunately, some founders, because they're so optimistic, they can't get themselves to come in and sort of admit the problems. And in fact, they're missing out on an opportunity, right? If we built the right board, as we were talking about earlier, what a great opportunity to walk in and say, I got a challenge.
Yeah.
I have this technological challenge. Can I get the board members who have great technology backgrounds? Can we get together and talk about this? I really want your advice about how to solve this problem.
Yeah.
But when you come in and you hide the ball about the issue and say everything's great, oh, we're going to hit the deadline, the product's going to get released on the next date, we're all good.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, you're still struggling and the product isn't released.
Yeah.
Maybe you deserve, right, to sort
Yeah.
of leave your position because you didn't use your board correctly and you didn't maximize the opportunity that was there.
Yeah, I mean it is challenging on that front though, because, and this is why being a CEO, startup CEO, public company CEO is a very lonely job, because you have conflicts of interest all over the place. Even with your board, they have a certain set of things that they're responsible for from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint. I've always provided a high level of transparency, but you have to have some amount of swagger and confidence in order to do that.
Sure.
It's like, hey, if they don't want me, I'll deal with it, but I think I'm the right person for this job in this situation. And if I weren't, I would tell them, hey, I'm not the right guy anymore. We need to find somebody else. So, but being vulnerable and collaborative, you need to have the right board dynamic, and you have to use a lot of discernment. It might be certain board members and not the entire board. And, rallying support around an issue with somebody that you can do that. Because there are, alliances that form, there are different people that are purely financial investors versus somebody that might be an outside board member versus somebody that has a ton of domain expertise, and kind of navigating through that. I've always said, one of the toughest things about being a CEO is you go from having one boss to having 6 bosses.
Right.
And believe me, they don't all think the same way.
You're
So
absolutely right.
challenging.
It's a really good point. You might have some board members who might view that as weakness, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some board members, and I can think of one specific client example, I won't use their name, but where the original founder was a very strong technology person, but didn't have a lot of sort of business background.
Right.
And when he would come to the board asking these questions about management issues, in the session afterwards, they'd be like, wow, he's really not really sure of himself and doesn't have any real confidence.
Yeah.
So you're right, it's absolutely, you got to balance it. You got to really read your board.
Yeah.
And just one little plug, by the way, for having the benefit of having your attorney in the board meeting, not as a board member, but attending the board meeting.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've done over the years, and my clients have found it really useful, is, and this as CEO, you're in there, you're running that board meeting, right?
Yeah.
You're presenting, you're bringing in your management team, you've got a lot going on. The hardest thing for you to do in that situation is to actually take a step back and really look at your board members and see how are they reacting to information. Are there side glances, or people making faces at each other? Are they smiling, right?
Yeah.
And one of the roles that I've played over the years is I can be that person, for the management team, to sit there and sort of see how things are being presented, watch the board's reaction. And then we always do a debrief after the board meetings and say, gee, how did that go?
Yeah.
How can we do better? Is there somebody you need to follow up with and make sure that they really understand what you're trying to do?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a good corporate attorney, whether it's your general counsel in-house or an outside attorney like Jeremy, they can be a great counselor. They attend board meetings, they have a lot of perspective, and definitely that's extremely valuable. I think the other thing that I've found valuable is boards and just people generally don't like surprises.
Oh my gosh.
So if you do have some surprise, especially like a negative surprise, they don't like positive surprises or negative surprises, honestly, because a positive surprise is like, oh, you didn't know what was going on or whatever. So I think that one of the things that I would do is, the week of the board meeting, make sure that especially if there was something where I didn't want people to be surprised, I would call each of them individually and talk to them and deal with that. So then we actually get to the board meeting, somebody doesn't have to blow up. Somebody might still do it anyway from a dramatic standpoint, but it's not because they're hearing the news for the first time. So
Patrick, that is probably one of the most important things that anybody who's going to be the CEO of a company could ever hear, is what you just said.
Yeah.
and I'm a total firm believer in no surprises.
Yeah.
The board should never hear anything.
If there's an occasional surprise that you beat earnings by some enormous amount, that's okay. But that's the one thing, and even that can't happen that often.
Exactly. And I love the fact that what you were describing is that you were reaching out to your board members, before the board meeting and talking to them and getting their input, and so they knew what was coming. And in fact, and some people say, gee, Jeremy, as an entrepreneur, I can't do that. I'm so busy. Just getting the board package together is all consuming. And I say, okay, fine. So pick one board member who's the lead board member on your board. Make sure you've talked to that person, get that person's input and feedback, and let that person then pick up the phone and let the other board members know what's going on.
Yeah, if you have that kind of relationship where you can actually, that person, whether the lead outside person or the chairman, and they actually do communicate. There have been situations I've been in some companies where I have talked to the chairman, and I think that person is going to talk to the other board members, and they
didn't. That sounds like you needed a different chairman then.
So, exactly, but sometimes you can't always control that. By the way, that wasn't my most recent company. So you're obviously a big advocate of giving back. I know you've been somebody that's been very active civically. Talk to us a little bit about Reboot and what that is and what you do with them. And that was something that I saw in your bio that was pretty cool.
Well, I just absolutely love what Reboot is doing. So just a little story. There's an organization in town that does basically like social venture investing, and I got invited to one of their events where they talked about this company, Reboot, and what they were doing is basically helping people who are leaving our military to reintegrate back into society to be able to get jobs in the private sector. And I heard that, and that's something I've always been really, really passionate about. When I think about the things I've worked with, whether it was Goodwill Industries in the past and other charitable organizations, I've always been focused on enabling people to be able to be independent, to get into the private sector and create value and create jobs. So I heard about this charity and this organization, and I actually went to what they call their graduation. So this is where the military folks go through a 3-week training program to basically, effectively, it's a rebooting, right? Like you go to boot camp to learn how to become, an army person or Marine,
right?
And this is a way of sort of rebooting you now for civilian life. And so I went and heard the graduates of this program speak, and it was just one of the most moving experiences I've ever had. To just watch the impact that this program had on these individuals and helping them develop their self-esteem and understand, how different it was going to be for them to be in the private sector, but how everything that they had done up to that point had prepared them to succeed in the private sector, and to just see one after the other get up there and talk about the impact this program had. That was it. I was sold. I picked up the phone, I called the head of the organization, I said, I want to volunteer to do pro bono work for your organization, and then ultimately they asked me to be on their board.
That's awesome. So tell us a little about something about yourself that most people don't know.
Well, I'm not sure most people don't know this because I'm sort of well known as someone who really enjoys wine. But sort of the newest thing that people may not know is I've been fortunate enough to have some successful clients, and one of my successful clients has allowed me to participate with him in his endeavors in building a new wine bar and building a winery.
Oh, cool.
So now I get to pursue another one of my passions, which is the wine industry, while still being able to be a lawyer.
That's awesome. Is there anything that we left out that you wanted to talk to our listeners about? I mean, I know that Jeremy's just a fantastic resource for many aspects of corporate law, and we're going to work on a series together to basically give some snapshots of various different things that I think are important or that Jeremy thinks are important for entrepreneurs. But short of that, was there anything kind of generally that we left out?
Well, I mean, I think one thing I'd want to point out is, I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I'm active specifically to be educating entrepreneurs. So in addition to articles that I may write or video blogs that I'll do, and I've been posting a series recently on video blogs about entrepreneurs and valuations and raising money. I also regularly, share information that I think is useful and interesting about the venture capital community, about building boards, about building companies. So I would really urge your listeners to to follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter to connect with me. And also my firm, we've just released a brand new entrepreneur-focused website called Mintz Edge, which again is all about educating entrepreneurs, providing, and entrepreneurs' favorite word, free resources, including, by the way, a little box that they can type in. If they want to ask one of us a question, they can ask a question and we'll respond, and that's free.
That's cool.
So, I urge you to take a look at Mintz Edge. I think you'll find a lot of really useful information on there to help you build your business.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate you doing this. This is Patrick Henry, the CEO of QuestFusion, with The Real Deal, What Matters.